Hello, welcome everyone. This is the Media Relations 101 webinar with RSA Insurance and SSE Ontario. My name is Marjorie Brands and I'm the co-managing director of the School for Social Entrepreneurs, which, as the name would suggest, is a school that helps people do-gooders do better in the world and start businesses that address social and environmental concerns. If this is the first time you've joined an SSE webinar, we really warmly welcome you to this gathering and hope that this won't be the first, or this will be the first, but not the last time that you join us. I'll be doing some introductions in a moment, but first I want to just do a few housekeeping items. Let me just pull up the screen here. Okay, one second. Okay. So if you can see on the screen, you'll see that this is a picture of our website. And if you'd like to learn more about the School for Social Entrepreneurs, please visit www.the-sse.ca and click on the About Us section, which is just here on the left-hand screen, or click on the Get Our Newsletter. And when you subscribe to the newsletter, you'll be informed of major announcements at the school, including different kinds of learning opportunities. And about RSA, which is our co-sponsor today, our co-sponsor today, RSA is a general Canadian insurer offering the broadest range of home, auto, business, marine, and travel insurance. And they've been a very generous sponsor to the School for Social Entrepreneurs in Canada and the UK. In addition to offering webinars like this one, they offer mentoring and coaching support to many of our students, have hosted Dragon's Den kinds of events, which our students are terrified of but enjoy in the end, and offer their core expertise in business to social entrepreneurs like you. So they will be talking today about Media Relations 101. So that you can participate fully in the call, I want to make sure that you understand the call logistics. So by default, if you're on your computer, you should be listening through your speaker system. However, if you'd like to join over the phone, all you need to do is click on the audios button at the bottom left of your screen and select Join by Phone, and the dial-in information will be displayed. You'll also have the opportunity to ask questions during the Q&A by texting your questions in the chat box on the screen. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation, and so you don't need to hold on to them until the end. You can just type them in, and I'll collect them and forward them to Siri when it's time. If you are calling on the phone, your sound is on mute by default, but if you press *9 during the Q&A session, you will unmute yourself and raise your hand. Pressing *6 will resume the mute. So again, it's *9 for unmute and *6 for mute. And lastly, if you're wondering, we will be presenting sharing the PowerPoint for today. So you can feel free to sort of just relax and listen and not worry that you have to take a bunch of notes, because we will share this presentation. Okay, so now a little bit about our expert, Siri Maldonado. Siri is an external and internal communications manager at RSA Canada. She's a results-driven and strategic communications professional with more than a decade of experience in the boutique agency and insurance sectors. She was responsible for external communication strategies for RSA Canada, including all social media channels, and is responsible for leading internal communications for various special projects across the company's Canadian business. Siri is a graduate of Seneca College and York University. So Siri, we are really thrilled to have you join us today. And I have to say that media relations is something that actually terrifies me. I'm a very shy person, and every time I I'm informed that I'm going to have a media interview, I get a bit scared. So I'm really eager to hear what you have to say today, and I'm sure that people on this call are also really curious about what sorts of things we can do to prepare ourselves and to feel really prepared to share our messages and to look really polished when we're on in a media interview. So, Siri, I'm going to turn the presentation over to you so that you can bring up your presentation. Okay, just one second.
Great. Thank you, Marjorie.
Okay, you should be now the host.
Okay.
But let's see. Yes, okay. There we go.
Okay, thanks, Marjorie. I'm really excited to be here to discuss media relations with everyone on the call. It's totally understandable that you're nervous. That's really normal. Even I myself am still really nervous in this role where I am asked to be a spokesperson. So hopefully, following this presentation, everyone will have a little bit more confidence and be prepared when doing media interviews. So for today's webinar, I'm going to go through what the current media landscape is and how that is affecting interviews today. I'm going to give everyone a formula that they can use when crafting their key messages and preparing for an interview. Some bridging techniques that will help you make sure that you stay on topic and really manage what you're saying and working with the journalist in a way where you can stay on topic. And then some do's and don'ts of interviews. Finally, some print, radio, and television tips. And then lastly, just how to build relationships with media. Okay, so today's media landscape has changed quite drastically than even 5 years ago, I would say. Newsrooms today are considerably smaller. They have very few people now working on, multiple stories at the same time. And what this has done is it's really changed how journalists are set up now. In the past, we used to have what we would call beat reporters, and beat reporters would be journalists that would be experts on a specific topic. So for insurance, for example, we have one well-known beat reporter that writes for the Globe and Mail, and her name is Jacqueline Nelson, and she would be considered an expert in insurance. But what we're seeing today is that there are very few beat reporters left because the newsrooms have shrunk. And what they are really looking for now is for us or, the content experts to go out to them during these interviews to really provide them with the expertise and the content that they're looking for. While they do, do their due diligence, do fact checking and whatnot, they don't have as much time or as many resources available to help them do this. So it's very sad how the newsrooms are changing, but at the same time, it is good news for us in terms of how we can really manage the interviews that we're doing now. Additionally, you will begin to see, or you probably already noticed, the lines between communications or media relations and marketing have really begun to blur. So there are things what we consider to be paid pieces, and you probably won't notice that these pieces are paid because they are written in these publications and they're not they're written in a typical way that an article would be written, and there's nothing on there that would say that it was a paid piece. So an example of this is in one of the top tier publications, which is examples would be the National Post and the Globe and Mail. So these would be publications that have the greatest reach. There was recently a piece on one of our competitors' CEOs, Manulife, and it was actually a 4-page spread, which is something that, we could only dream of getting. And like for us, it's been, we've seen challenges in getting our name out there, although, we've had opportunities where our president and CEO have been featured in these pieces, but just seeing a 4-page spread is just something, that you rarely see. And when I brought this up to our agency that we work with, they they actually suspect that this was a paid piece. So just to give you some perspective, like you would never know that otherwise, and you would just assume that, you know, they had really pitched a great story and got 4 pages in the post. Meanwhile, this may not be the case. So that is really changing how news is done today, and of course that's because advertisements and that sort of thing has really gone down for newspapers and online publications. Another thing that is impacting the media landscape is, of course, social media. Social media is just, or has really been impacting news just because of the speediness and how quickly things can be shared across the network. And we've seen in the past, although it's getting better now, a lot of fake news being shared. So a great example of this, I would say, is I recently attended a conference where they talked about crisis communications. And one of the examples that they brought up was where a plane had crashed on the tarmac at an airport. And people inside the airport had seen the plane crash, and they began tweeting about and shooting videos of what was going on. And one of the tweets that was being widely shared across the news was from somebody that worked at Google. And because they worked at Google, the news considered it to be legitimate. This person had tweeted that everybody looked fine. They were seeing people escaping the airplane. Meanwhile, everything was not fine, and there were actually some fatalities, and the airport and airlines were working frantically to get some messaging out. But unfortunately, in this case, I believe you know, major television networks like CNN had already picked this up and had shared this information, and it's just really challenging to be able to react in a timely manner and to get around that in those types of situations, and it results in fake news. So that's something else that's really, you know, social media is really having a great impact on what the media landscape is now. So, you know, that the trend in using social media as a trusted news source is changing. So fake news has had an impact, and people are beginning to turn back to more trusted resources like journalists and reporters, and you know, waiting for responses from the companies, which is great news. So I hope that just gave everybody a little bit more perspective about what's going on right now. So I'm going to turn things into the messaging formula. So I would strongly suggest that before any interview, you always prepare and put your key messaging and speaking points together. And I hope that this, the way that this is set up, will help you to do that. So we've broken it up into 3 sections, which is the audience need or problem, the industry generic solution, and then your solution. So what is news today? News today is really about the conflict. So you have to think about what would be newsworthy to the audience and to the reporter, and what would really pull them in to want to cover what you want to share. So a good example that I could share with you guys today is RSA is going to be launching a road safety campaign called Truce TO. And how we came up with that was we know that there's a rising incidence of accidents on the road, and that people are talking about it, but of course we needed to come up with a different perspective, which I'll go into it further. So the conflict there is that road incidents are on the rise, and the audience need or problem is that everybody collectively wants to improve this, and people are really engaged in why this is happening now, especially when, you know, we've made improvements with car safety. We do have road rules and training in terms of how people are supposed to even cycle or drive on the streets, and for pedestrians as well. So that was what we identified as the audience need or problem, and what people would be interested in our campaign. So the industry or generic solution, this is where you would really bring up what other people are doing or what is currently being talked about in the news. So in terms of road safety campaign, we know that everyone is talking about distracted driving, and that distracted driving or drivers are usually the ones who are blamed for road incidents. So now how do we differentiate ourselves from what is being talked about and from our competitors? And for us, that was really looking at how we could bring harmony to the streets by looking at this from a 360 perspective, so from the perspective of drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists, and not putting blame on anyone. So to help us in terms of thinking what our solution, to help support our solution of demonstrating that not one group is to be blamed for road incidents, and that all of us, play more than one of these roles at one time, we launched a survey to learn more about current road behaviors. And it was very interesting to learn that, all three groups felt like they could do a better job at road safety, and that all three groups recognized that there could be more education and learning to help prevent the incidents that are happening. So when we begin to pitch this out to the media, that will be our angle, going out to everyone. And I would also suggest that you really think about how you can not only pitch but add some creative elements to how you put together the campaign. So I'll show a little bit more of what we're doing on the next slide, but I just want to reiterate just how important it is to prepare for all of your interviews by following this formula. So make sure that you write out your key points. Use really generic, general language. Don't use jargon. And also practice, practice, practice. So, find, a friend or family member, somebody who you could really go through the formula with, and receive some honest feedback would be great. And just also know that once you have this together, the intent is that you don't get stuck in a passive Q&A. So I know a lot of people are scared about being in a situation, or maybe you have been, where the journalist keeps asking you questions and you don't know the answers and it's off topic. Well, using this formula, you should be able to speak for a good 5 minutes or so without being interrupted by the journalist. And by feeding them or providing them with all the content, then the idea is that they won't have many questions to ask you. And another recommendation I would give you is to also, if you do have statistics, journalists and the news really love having some statistics and other data to support what you are saying. Okay, so I'm just going to move on to the next slide. That'll kind of give you guys an idea of the campaign. So this is just an infographic that we put together just to show what the different results were from our survey. And this is something that we will be using as part of our media pitching and on our microsite. So if you're able to think of other creative ways to support your media outreach, I would highly recommend it. The media, they love visuals, they love numbers. Something like this could be easily shared across multiple social media channels. So those are just some things that you should just keep in mind when putting together any media releases or pitches. Okay, so as Marjorie mentioned, many of us get really nervous when we're doing interviews, and as much as we have the formula, there will be journalists that will interrupt you and try to, get you a little bit off topic. But with these bridging techniques, you should be able to steer back the interview and take control of the interview. So that's always what you want to do. And for us as an insurer, we always run the risk of people thinking, why are you doing a road safety campaign? You guys, you don't want to pay claims. That's the only reason why you're doing this. And actually, we want to increase road behaviors because we don't ever want our customers to put in claims. And we ourselves are, users of the road, and we want our people and ourselves to be safe on the road. So that is just, something that we have to be conscious of whenever we're doing any media outreach on this. So the first bridging technique I would suggest is going back to set the context. So in this case, as I mentioned, people might be skeptical of RSA's intentions behind this campaign. And this is just a phrase that I, just an example of what you could say to demonstrate, you know, that we are committed to road safety, and it's not just about reducing the number of claims. So you know, you always can agree with the journalist, or you can use your own wording for this, but I would say, I agree, that is interesting. However, a road campaign is not about blaming any one group. Instead, we are focused on educating everyone on road safety with the hopes to bring back harmony to the streets of Toronto. So again, that's a way for you to get back to your key messaging, and then, you know, not focus on blaming just drivers or talking about reducing the number of claims, but being able to go back to set the context and get back to your key messages. Another point is, it's okay to agree or disagree. So again, going on an assumption that people will be skeptical of our campaign, and, you know, a lot of journalists may ask you for your opinion during an interview. So whether or not you agree or disagree, you can totally start off your sentence as part of your bridging technique to say something like, yes, you are correct in your assumption that as an insurer, we do have an interest in road safety due to the increasing number of incidents. However, we are very focused on prevention and hope that the campaign will stop these incidents from ever happening in the first place. So that's just another technique that you can use to get back on topic and go back to key messages. So another tip would be to park or postpone the comment and go back to reiterate the main topic of the interview. So in this instance, again, you know, there could be something out in the news, something happened about us, you know, denying a claim, or another story about one of our competitors that would be out there, and they may want to ask for our opinion. You can be confident enough to let them know that, you know, that's not what you're here to talk about today, and then go back to your key messages to get them back on topic. So an example here of what I would say is, it's great to hear how passionate you are about insurance claims related to road incidents. However, I'm here today to discuss how all three groups play an important role in road safety. Okay, and the last bridging technique that I will share with you today is another way that you can get back to your main key messages is to repackage the question that they ask you and lead them back to where you want to go. So an example of this is, again, maybe a journalist asks, I'm really skeptical of your road campaign. Well, I would respond and say, I understand that there are some individuals that would be skeptical of this initiative and the role that we play as an insurer, but we believe that we can help to increase road safety by tackling the issue from this unique perspective. So using what they say and rephrasing it, and then also getting back to your key messages. So these bridging techniques, I would recommend, you know, you don't have to use all of them. You kind of pick and choose whatever is more comfortable with your style, and that's what I would go with. So that's just another way that can help. These are just other techniques that you can use in addition to your formula to make sure that you control the messages and control the interview with the reporter. Okay, so some do's and don'ts. So as part of the preparation and as part of the formula, I did go through, you know, briefly about knowing your audience and knowing why something would be newsworthy. Another tip would be around that is to make sure that you cater your messaging to your audience, so, and to the publication. So for example, if you are, you know, on the radio, you might use a little different tone of voice compared to if you're doing an interview in the Globe and Mail, which has a very different audience. Or if you're, you know, doing an interview with more of a online resource, again, I would think about and do a little bit of research in terms of who their audience is, and cater your messaging and tone of voice to that. Another do is, as I mentioned, prepare, 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 so you can't practice enough. I still get nervous when I do these sorts of things, and the only way that I've improved, and you know, there's always room for improvement, definitely, is to prepare. So that's putting your messages together, using the formula, that's practicing with a colleague. You could even, you know, practice in front of a mirror to see how you look, and how, and just if there's anything that you can work on in terms of your body language. So that's just another really important thing to remember. And the third is to take control. So don't be shy to direct the interview how you want it to be done using the formula. You should be able to really take control and give the reporter everything that they want without having them interfere too much. There's a way, of course, to politely connect with the reporters and let them know that, you're not comfortable speaking on the topic, or that's not what you're here to speak to them about today. So there are ways and to really get around that and make sure that you stick to your key messages and get out there in the best way possible to represent your brand and your company. Some don'ts include the passive Q&A session. So that's where the reporter and you get stuck in this back and forth Q&A, and there's just more room for error in this case. And while sometimes you can't get away from that, you do want to try to make sure that you control it so that you stay on message and get what you want to say out there in the way that you want. So using these tips and the formula should really help you to do that. And I would also say, like, another trick to do is to get to know the reporter as well. So you could just look online for some previous articles that they've written, just so you can get an idea of the type of work that they do. So another mistake I would say is to never say no comment. Reporters do not like that, and it's not well perceived by the audience. So instead of no comment, you can say that you can get back to them later on that, or again, use your bridging technique to let them know that's not what you're there for, or you can't speak on that specific topic. So don't be afraid to just respond and let them know why you can't discuss that. And then lastly, of course, don't use jargon. As an insurer, we have so much jargon that people do not understand, and that is the last thing that you want to do when you're doing interviews, because it's just very challenging for people to really follow and understand, and you just lose them way too quickly before you get right down to the end of the piece. So that's just another recommendation that I would put forth. Okay, so I just wanted to share a couple of examples of an interview that has gone really well. So one of our employees, who is our national catastrophe manager, did a great piece with the Global News on winter preparedness. And the link, unfortunately, doesn't work very well in this, but I would recommend that when you get the presentation to listen to it, because you will see that he does a great job in getting, talking about all of our key messages, getting out there about why it's important for people to be prepared for the winter with a kit. And then he, throws in RSA just at the right time before you lose everyone, because of course, I should have mentioned this earlier, but you don't want to get, as part of the formula, you don't want to get to your solution and your branding too quickly in the interview, because you just lose people's attention, because they don't see that you're they don't get the opportunity to really see that you're an expert in the topic, more that you want to sell your product or your idea. But what I can show you is this video that we put together as part of our pitch. So we're, as an insurer, we are very archaic, and how things are done today, we really needed to step up our game and modernize, the way that we interact with our customers and with the public. So as part of the pitch, we did an infographic similar to the one you saw before, but we also supported this with a really what's in my bag video. So even though it's insurance themed, we did use something modern that's similar to, those tasty videos where you see recipes being done online as part of the pitching. So I'm just gonna click on this, and hopefully you guys can hear it. And if not, you can just listen to it once you get the presentation.
Siri? Siri, can you hear me?
Yeah? Is it not working?
I think you might, if you can maybe exit the share screen and then click on the share screen again with the YouTube.
Sure.
We can't see the video.
Okay. Okay, can you see it now?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that.
So Siri, we're not hearing the sound very well, but we can see the video, and it might just be helpful to describe what people who are on the phone probably couldn't hear.
Okay, great. So that that particular video, how we, oops, sorry, just a second. So that particular video we use as, part of the pitching, as I mentioned, and it goes through what we call the 5 Ps. So as part of a winter emergency, what Anthony and, other groups, even the government, has been promoting during the winter season was for families to really be prepared in the event that a storm happens. So the ice storm, for example, where people, lost their power for a few days, or even any flooding that happens. It's just we just recommended putting together a kit that you could quickly pick up and take away in the event that you had to leave your home. So just remembering not to forget about your pets, so pet food, to bring any documentation like passports and that sort of thing with you, your health card, to also make sure that you have non-perishable food items available like granola bars and water and cash, of course, in case the technology doesn't work and your debit and MasterCard won't be able to support you through this. And of course, another big thing is many of us can't really operate without our phones, so to make sure that you have your phone charged and ready to go in case you need it. And I know that it's not always easy, obviously, to put these really visual pieces together, but I would really recommend just, there are many people that do videos or students that are working on things to help develop their portfolios, that you would be able to reach out to them and see if you can work on something like that together, or even the infographic again, because while we're able to get some media coverage with Anthony, we also use the visual pieces like the infographic and the video on our social media channels for also shared, by our customers and brokers. So just something else to consider. Okay, and then just on this part, I'm going to go through some tips and did you knows for print, radio, and television. So when you're doing a print interview, I think the majority of the time, at least for us, they do this over the phone, but they will record the interview because, as you know, it's really hard to be able to keep track of everything that is being discussed at the time. So that is common practice and not anything that you shouldn't be scared about. Another thing is that, if you do end up making a mistake during the interview, don't be afraid to correct yourself, but make sure that you do it right away. The third piece is to respect their deadlines. So as I shared earlier in the presentation, newsrooms are much smaller. There are fewer people working on things, so they do have much tighter deadlines to get things published and out. And lastly, don't ask to see the article before it runs. That is not common practice at all. You do need to trust in the ability of the reporter, and of course, also in your ability in delivering the messages that you have put together and prepared. So just make sure that you don't see it. Just make sure that you don't ask to see it, because that could be, very insulting to the journalist. And of course, that's a very different case if you do end up doing a paid piece. Those are more controlled. You do have more power to really look over and review the content that's being put together. But that's really different than doing a one-to-one interview. Okay, so for radio, if you do end up going into the station, I always recommend going and arriving early. Punctuality is something that is really important and also helps to build your credibility and relationship with the news outlet. Don't make too much noise. You can actually hear a lot on the microphone, so like shuffling paper and that sort of thing can be heard over the radio.
Siri, speaking of noise,
yep.
Can I just interrupt for a second? I hear quite a bit of background noise, but because you're the host, I can't mute people. If you were on the phone or on the computer and are not on mute, may I suggest everyone put themselves on mute just so we have a little bit less of the background noise. Okay, thank you. Sorry, Siri.
No worries. So usually these are one-to-one interviews, so always speak to the reporter, not the microphone. Make sure you keep eye contact. You'd be amazed at, how different your voice is, and how much more confident you come off when you do that. And then the last point would be, if you use your hands when you speak, continue to do that, because again, that adds really to your tone of voice, and you sound much better when you do this. Like when I did the media training, that's what they recommended as well. And you always want to treat it the same way as you would in a face-to-face interview. And another thing to point out that I didn't include on here is that a lot of radio interviews are now done over the phone. Okay. This slide is on television interviews. So if you ever have the opportunity to do one of these, just some tips here to help guide you through the process. So again, always look at the interviewer, not the camera. When I did my media training, you could really tell some of the feedback that I was getting was not to look at the camera, and you could really tell when I was, and it just came off as if, I was really distracted and not engaged with what I was speaking on. Another tip would be to don't wear heavy patterns or bright colors. I'm not sure if you've ever noticed, but sometimes when you do watch a show and somebody's wearing a heavy pattern, it comes out a little bit blurry, and it's really hard to concentrate on what the person is saying when they're distracted by that. Again, use body language. If you speak with your hands, great. 90% of our communications is nonverbal, so people will, especially on television, be looking at how you do come off. And then the last point is, don't step up and walk away right when the interview is over. So again, when I did my media training, I was super nervous. When they ended the video, I walked away right when the question was done, and it looked really ridiculous when they played that back to me. So just be conscious that they may be continuing to shoot, and that there are producers and other people on site that will direct you and let you know when the interview is done. Okay, and then the last point is building relationships with journalists. So this is something, that is, I would say, is really important, especially for everyone on this call right now, for entrepreneurs, because you do want to be able to partner with credible journalists to be able to share your story and talk about what you're doing with others. So when building relationships, this does take a lot of time, definitely, and journalists are incredibly busy. You're busy as well, so don't feel as if you're going to be able to do this right away. But as I mentioned before, I would really recommend doing your homework. So see and read up on the different type of pieces that they've written, where they do like to write. Check out their other social media accounts to see what their interests are, whether it be Twitter or Instagram and that sort of thing, because you'll be able to really get to know a person that way. The second point would be to, just stick to what you know, stick to what you're expert on when you're having these discussions with them. Don't feel like you have to be able to know everything on a topic, or that they won't want to build this relationship with you if you don't know something, because even getting that initial meeting is really important, and it's really showing you that you're going in the right direction. And then the last point would be to be really transparent and honest. People can really have our intuition is really great, and we can really pick on whether or not somebody is not being genuine, and that is, obviously a really big turnoff. So I would just, stay true to yourself would be the last tip that I would give. Okay, so now I'm going to open things up to Q&A. I hope that you all found this information really helpful.
Thank you so much, Siri. That was really fabulous, and we will take a bunch of questions. In the meantime, Siri, can you make me the host so that I can see people's chat?
Oh, yep.
And I just wanted to say that I think the biggest myth that I had going into this webinar was that as social entrepreneurs like the people on this call don't really have access to the big media like the television and news broadcasters, radio and so on, because that tends to be for like larger organizations that have whole media departments. But social entrepreneurs tend to be one person, two person, or 3-person shops, like pretty small. So it's pretty difficult to figure out how you get your message out there. But I think what you, or at least for me, taught was that in the age of social media, there's actually a lot more access to traditional media than I had ever thought. And so that's such a big revelation. Really, really thank you for sharing that with us.
And I mean,
yep.
I would also, another recommendation that our agency has shared with us in terms of social media, which is a huge, topic, everyone's doing it, is even if you don't have content to share, don't be shy about engaging in discussions with people. So if you see somebody that's talking about, what something similar to what you're trying to change or drive, don't be shy about jumping in on the conversation and really getting your name out there that way.
Right. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to move into the questions. And just to remind folks, if you want to ask a question and you're on the phone, all you need to do is press *9 on your phone, and that will allow you to raise your hand. And if you are on the computer, you can either type your question into the chat function, or simply take yourself off mute and ask the question. So I will ask Siri a couple of questions that came in prior to the call and during the call. So one of the questions was, how do I deal with the media during a crisis? So maybe there's been a scandal at your organization, or something that's really unfortunate. Yeah. So what do you do in those cases?
So, I mean, managing crisis communication situation is something that, is very challenging. Like, most organizations and individuals have a tough time navigating through it. And I would say, I would recommend just really being responsive and making sure that you state the facts and know that they are facts before you go out with anything. And if you can, try to connect with others that have been in similar situations, or look up online what others have done so that you can learn from their mistakes and really think about how you want to navigate through this. I think that you should, definitely make sure that you prepare to respond to the answers, but you also want to get out ahead of, or, in as much time as possible to make sure that you, your response comes out before, the people start getting really up in arms about it, because, with social media, things get spread like wildfire. So you do want to get out in a timely manner. And I would always recommend that you do respond to reporters in a crisis situation. For us, we have, several media threats, even from really huge networks like the CBC, and you can't just not respond and try to hide from what is going on. You do need to respond to them to let them know whether or not you're working through this. I mean, they've been pretty understanding once you explain the situation, but of course you don't want to say too much. So, instead of being a spokesperson or talking to the media directly, try to get them a media response written by email.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. We have a question from the floor, which is, do press releases still work?
Yes, they do. So you don't see people using them as much, but they have really evolved in that they're not just written pieces anymore. They do include some sort of media, so it's always best practice to at least include some sort of image with it. But for us, when we did the winter preparedness kit, we included the video so that, even if they don't take content from the actual press release, there's something else that they can share. And we also found that every time we do put something out on the wire, that it is picked up, especially by, the smaller regional pieces, because, with newsrooms being smaller, they're always looking for content to put up.
I see. So I actually understand that there's a difference between a media release or media advisory and a press release. Is that something you can speak to?
So a press release usually is coming out and you're promoting something or talking about a big announcement. And I would say a media advisory is something more like for us, we don't really do media advisories because I guess only certain types of organizations would do that when there's something, legitimate or big that is happening where you do want to get out. And if you're in the situation where a ton of media outlets are coming to you for an answer, then you want to do media advisory versus trying to navigate and respond to everybody. So it's more reactive, where a press release is more proactive, I would say.
Okay. I had understood one other difference of the media advisory is, like, you can send a media advisory, like let's say you're going to have an event and you want media to come, you can send out a media advisory prior to the event. And that gives sort of the information about who, where, when, what, how, and that the press release become like the following day, where you have had the event and you want to shape the messages around what the event looked like and what the key highlights were. So that was another thing I'd heard about media advisories versus press releases.
Okay, yeah. So we would do that for the Truth TO. We don't call it a media. I think it's something about, like, for events, they have a calendar typically that is used. So Canadian Newswire has a calendar where you could put up that information up for people and invite them to attend the event.
Oh, wait. Can you say that again? Because that actually sounds like a key piece of information. So if you go on Canadian Newswire, it's possible for us to list our events there?
I believe that's from, I can confirm for you, for everybody after this, but that's what we're trying to do for our the launch of our Truth TO event. I think there's like a page that has a calendar of things that are going on, but I can let everybody know for sure.
Okay. I mean, I would imagine that you might have to pay for something like that, because that just seems like an amazing opportunity. But if it is possible, or if it's worth the money, many of us, I think, on the call would welcome the opportunity to be able to reach reporters. Actually, I will just mention one other service that I had heard about. It's called Help a Reporter Out, Hiro, I think. I'll in the follow-up, I'll give people the contact information. But they send out these regular bulletins every day in particular areas, saying, I'm looking for someone who can speak on the record about, fill in the blank topic. And then you can pitch to that reporter saying, I know how to speak about that topic. So it's a really great service. I looked at it for quite a while, and it's a little bit more US than Canada focused, but they do have Canadian content, and then there are some US outlets that will take a Canadian voice. So just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, great tip.
Okay, so we have another question from the floor, which is, What do I do when, okay, this is sort of a two-pronged approach. What do I do when I make a mistake, or the reporter makes a mistake about something that I've said? And then what do I do when a spokesperson for my organization makes a mistake? And what are the biggest mistakes they make? How do we address that?
Okay, so if you're in an interview and you make a mistake, or the reporter, makes a mistake on what you're trying to deliver, I would recommend using a bridging technique, and don't be afraid to correct them. I know it's tough, but there is a way that you can do it in a respectful manner. But I would definitely recommend that you do correct them right when it happens, so that you can make sure that your messages aren't being misinterpreted. And in terms of when a spokesperson does it, it's really challenging. So we've had that happen to us before, obviously, and there's ways that you can get around it. I mean, more often than not, I think it's really challenging to go back to the reporter to ask them to fix it, unless it's something that is really will really, for example, affect people's money. So for us, if a reporter reports incorrect about how claims are being processed, and that would obviously be something that we want to go back to them on. But we've had our president and CEO say things that have been magnified and misinterpreted, and for us, we've done things like we've tried to look at other outlets that we could pitch our story to, that we trust, that would be able to reinforce what our key messages are, and where we would be able to really share what we were trying to say versus going back to that same journalist.
Right. Okay, thank you. We are getting close to the end of our time, and I know that we want to be very respectful of folks. This is probably their lunch hour, so we'll call the call to a close and give you a chance, Siri, to share any last thoughts or questions. And if your question was not answered today and you still want to ask Siri something, please feel free to write us back when we send out the call notes, and we will make sure that you get an answer to your question. So Siri, any other last words of wisdom?
I would just say that, doing media interviews is very nerve-wracking, and that's for everyone. Like, we even see our executives, still need coaching, still need us to help prepare them for it. So don't feel like you're not good at something. It does take practice, and as long as you prepare, I think that you guys will be able to really control the interview and do what you want. And of course, use your other resources where you can. So think about how you can really leverage social media and build relationships online with other influencers or people who are trying to do similar things to get the word out.
Well, thank you very, very much, Siri. This has been fabulous information. And thank you, everyone, for your attention and participation on the call today. We look forward to seeing you again on an SSE and RSA webinar in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.